8-foot alien queen laughed at the idea of breeding with a human. Until she got pregnant, the planet of Zynar was a world of harsh deserts and towering spires of obsidian stone. The skies were perpetually shrouded in dark clouds, casting a cold shadow over the land below. The Zynari, a race of 8-foot-tall beings with scales of silver and crimson, had ruled the galaxy with unmatched technology and ruthless precision for centuries. To them, no species was more advanced or superior than their own. They were the pinnacle of intelligence and power. And for the Zynari queen, this belief was absolute. Queen Zarya, the ruler of Zynar, sat on her throne, surrounded by her most trusted advisors and generals. Her red eyes gleamed with pride as she surveyed the map of the galaxy displayed before her. Her empire stretched far and wide, from the outer rim of the Andromeda Galaxy to the core worlds of the Milky Way. Her armies were unmatched, her scientists pioneers of unknown technologies, and her rule unchallenged. The Zynari were the undisputed masters of the stars. But today something was different. In the grand hall of the palace, human emissaries had arrived. A group of humans, diplomats and soldiers, had traveled from Earth to meet with the Queen. They had been granted an audience, something rare for the species so far down the galactic hierarchy. Humans were considered primitive by the Zynari, barely more than children compared to the might of their empire. But the humans, eager to negotiate peace and trade, had insisted on meeting with the Queen herself. Among them stood Captain Eli Carson, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence. His uniform, though practical, carried the emblem of Earth's space fleet. He had been chosen for this delicate mission because of his reputation for being unafraid to face overwhelming odds. Yet, even Eli felt the weight of the moment as he stepped into the Queen's presence. Queen Zarya regarded the humans with a raised brow, her lips curling into a slight sneer. The humans were nothing more than a curious, if somewhat amusing, spectacle. They had made their way across the stars, but only to offer trade agreements that would benefit them far more than her own people. The Queen had no interest in negotiating with such an inferior species. Eli stepped forward, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "Your Majesty, we come with an offer of peace. We wish to establish mutual cooperation, to share knowledge and resources that could benefit both our peoples." Zarya's laughter echoed through the hall, sharp and cold. "Peace. Cooperation," she repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think I would waste my time negotiating with a species that can barely grasp the basics of interstellar travel? Your planet is barely more than a speck in the vastness of the universe. Why would I lower myself to such a level?" Eli stood tall, unflinching in the face of her ridicule. He knew what the Zynari thought of humans. To them, they were nothing but ants, crawling on the surface of their own world. But Eli was not one to back down. "We may be young in the eyes of the galaxy, Your Majesty, but we are not weak. We have something to offer, something you might not expect." Zarya's curiosity was piqued, but she masked it with a cold smile. "And what, pray tell, could your species possibly offer that would interest me?" Eli hesitated for a moment, then spoke boldly, his eyes locked with hers. "I propose a challenge. If you truly think of us as inferior, then prove it. I will engage in a test that will show you the strength of humanity." The Queen's gaze narrowed, her crimson eyes glowing with amusement. "A test? What kind of test would that be?" Eli's words surprised even him. They came from somewhere deep within, a spark of defiance that had grown since the moment he stepped into the alien's court. "If you want to prove your superiority, then you should consider breeding with a human. It will show you how far above you we really are." The room fell silent. The Zynari advisors exchanged confused glances, and even Eli could hardly believe the words that had come out of his mouth. It was absurd. It was risky. But in that moment he could see the Queen's arrogance, her certainty in her own superiority. He knew that if she accepted, it would change everything. Zarya's laughter rang out again, louder this time, and filled the hall with an eerie resonance. "Breed with a human," she scoffed. "You think your species is worthy of such a thing? How utterly ridiculous. You, a mere insect, believe you can match the power of a Zainari. I am the queen of the stars. Your genetics are nothing more than a curiosity to be studied, not something to be mingled with mine." But despite her laughter, there was something in her eyes, something faint, something uncertain. The queen had not expected such a response. She had expected fear, perhaps submission, but instead she had found defiance. And that defiance made her curious. The humans were ushered out of the hall, and Zarya turned to her advisors. "Prepare the ritual," she ordered coldly. "We will show this human his place. Let him think he has outsmarted us. We will prove once and for all that the Zainari are unmatched." But deep down in the recesses of her mind, a small, unexpected thought lingered. What if the human was right? What if there was something more to them than she had ever considered? She pushed the thought away, unwilling to entertain such a possibility. After all, how could a mere human challenge the queen of the Zainari? Days passed, and preparations were made. The Zainari had a strange, almost clinical approach to reproduction, one that revolved around strengthening the bloodlines and ensuring the survival of the species. The ritual was an ancient one, used only for the most important genetic experiments. Zarya had never considered it necessary to involve a human in such matters, but now it seemed inevitable. Eli was summoned back to the palace. He had no idea what to expect, but he had a feeling that this was no longer just about diplomacy. This was a challenge that could change everything. As he entered the palace once again, he was led to a private chamber, its walls adorned with strange alien symbols. The air felt thick with tension. Zarya stood at the center, her posture regal, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. "Prepare yourself, human," she said, her voice calm, but there was an edge to it now. "You wanted a challenge. You shall have it." Eli squared his shoulders. "I'm ready." And in that moment both of them understood this wasn't just a battle of strength or intelligence. This was a battle of wills. And for the first time, Zarya was beginning to question whether her superiority was as absolute as she had once believed. The chamber was quiet except for the low hum of the advanced technology lining the walls. Eli Carson stood at the center, his hands clenched by his sides, trying not to show how uneasy he felt. He had been in many dangerous situations in his life, from skirmishes with hostile alien species to facing natural disasters, but nothing had prepared him for this. The air was thick with tension. Queen Zarya stood before him, tall and regal, her silver-scaled body almost glowing in the soft light of the chamber. Her crimson eyes were fixed on him, though they betrayed no emotion. She had always been so certain of herself, so in control. Yet something had shifted in the air between them ever since their last meeting. There was an intensity now, a challenge neither of them had expected. "You wanted a test." Zarya's voice broke the silence, cold and commanding. "You will have it." Eli nodded, his throat dry, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm ready, Your Majesty." Zarya waved a hand, signaling to her attendants. The large doors of the chamber slid open, and two Zainari guards entered, carrying strange equipment. Eli didn't know exactly what they were planning, but from the way they moved, he could tell this was a serious ritual, one reserved for only the most important tasks. "Prepare yourself," Zarya ordered once more, her gaze still locked on Eli. "This will not be a simple matter." Eli took a deep breath. He had no idea what this ritual was going to entail, but he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to be what he had expected. The Zainari were not known for their compassion or tenderness. Their rituals were cold, clinical affairs, designed to test physical and mental endurance. To them, the process of reproduction wasn't about love or connection. It was about strength and survival. Eli was no longer just a human in the eyes of the Queen, he was a challenge. A test of their species' superiority. He straightened his back, trying to keep his nerves at bay. His mission had always been clear: to prove that humanity had value, to show the Zainari that they were not as weak as they thought. But now, this was no longer just a political game. He was standing at the edge of something much bigger, something that would decide the fate of not only himself, but potentially his entire species. Zarya gestured again, and a strange, bioluminescent screen flickered to life behind her. Symbols and numbers appeared, shifting and rearranging in ways that Eli couldn't understand. The technology was beyond anything Earth had ever seen. A soft buzzing filled the room as the Zainari prepared their equipment. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Human," Zarya's voice was firm, her eyes piercing. "You may not understand the ritual, but it is necessary. This is not a simple act of breeding. This is an experiment, one that will test the limits of both your body and your mind. If you cannot endure, you will fail. And failure will have consequences." Eli didn't flinch. He had faced many dangers in his life, but this was something entirely different. Despite the alien's cold tone, he felt a spark of defiance within him. "I won't fail," he said, his voice steady. Zarya tilted her head slightly, as if intrigued. "We shall see." One of the attendants moved forward, holding a strange, cylindrical device. It glowed with a soft blue light as it hovered in the air, rotating slowly. Eli watched it closely, trying to make sense of it. "This device," Zarya explained, "is designed to synchronize your biology with ours, to measure compatibility. You will both endure its effects." She gave him a sharp smile, "though I suspect you will find it difficult." Eli's heart raced, but he kept his face neutral. He didn't know what the device would do to him, but he wasn't about to show fear. This was a test, one that could very well change everything. As the device approached him, he reached out, trying to steady his breathing. The Zainari's gaze followed every movement, but they didn't seem interested in what he felt. For them, this was scientific, cold, clinical. The moment the device made contact with his skin, a surge of energy shot through him. His muscles stiffened, his vision blurred, and he gasped as a wave of heat washed over his body. The device hummed softly as it seemed to draw something from him, his essence, his energy. It was painful, but not in a way he could describe. It felt like something was draining from deep inside him, as if his very strength was being tested and stripped away. Through the pain, Eli tried to remain focused. He needed to show them that humanity was more than just fragile bodies. He wasn't going to back down. Zarya watched him closely, her expression unreadable. Her own people didn't show emotion the way humans did, but Eli thought he saw a glimmer of something, perhaps even curiosity in her eyes. "How does it feel?" Zarya asked, her voice soft, almost mocking. "To feel so small in the face of something much greater than yourself." Eli clenched his jaw, trying to push through the sensation. "I'm not small," he replied through gritted teeth. "I'm human." Zarya's lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement crossing her face. "Yes, you are human, and that is exactly why this test is so interesting. Your species is so fragile, yet you have a resilience that is difficult to ignore." Eli's breath came in short gasps as the device continued its work. He couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Not ever. The energy from the device gradually started to fade, but the strain on his body didn't. It lingered in his muscles, in his mind, in the very air he breathed. For a moment, Eli thought he might collapse, but he didn't. He stayed on his feet, his body trembling but standing tall. Zarya raised an eyebrow, seemingly impressed. "You're stronger than I thought." "Maybe we aren't as weak as you think," Eli said, his voice hoarse but full of defiance. For a long moment, the Queen simply stared at him, her gaze intense. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward a different part of the room, signaling that the test was complete. Eli slowly relaxed, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The strain on his body remained, but he had endured. He had proven that, at least for now, he could withstand the tests of the Zainari. But the true challenge had only just begun. Zarya's experiment was far from over, and Eli knew that what had started as a test of strength would soon evolve into something far more dangerous. As he left the chamber to rest, he couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? And more importantly, would he survive it? Days had passed since Eli Carson had endured the Zainari's brutal test, and although he had survived, the weight of what had transpired hung heavily on his shoulders. The pain from the device lingered in his muscles, a constant reminder of how far he had pushed his body and mind. But what troubled him most wasn't the physical strain. It was what he had started to feel during the ritual, and more importantly, what the Queen herself had seemed to feel. Queen Zarya's coldness had never wavered, at least not outwardly. She remained as powerful and unyielding as ever, but there was something different about her now, something Eli couldn't quite place. A flicker of doubt, curiosity, whatever it was unsettling. Eli had expected to be dismissed after the ritual, perhaps sent back to his ship or into the hands of the Zainari's cold military machinery. Instead, the Queen had insisted on seeing him again, a demand he had no choice but to obey. He found himself standing before her once more, in a room much like the one where they had met before, dark and foreboding, with only the faint glow of alien technology to light the space. The air felt thick with anticipation, as though something important was about to happen. "Captain Carson," Zarya's voice broke the silence, as sharp and commanding as ever. "You have survived the test, but survival alone means little. You are still an unknown element in my world, something I cannot predict or control." Eli stood tall, his posture unwavering. "I told you before, Your Majesty, I'm human. I don't need to be controlled." Zarya's gaze narrowed, her crimson eyes locking onto his. "Yes, I am beginning to understand that, and it is troubling." Eli couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at that. He had expected her to be dismissive or cold as she had been before, but there was something else in her tone now, a flicker of uncertainty. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "I've observed you, Captain," Zarya continued, her tone softer now. "Your strength is not just physical, is it? There is something deeper inside you, a resilience, a defiance. It is curious." Eli met her gaze. "I've told you I'm human, we don't give up easily." For a long moment the Queen remained silent, as if contemplating his words. Then, to his surprise, she took a step closer to him, her presence imposing yet strangely compelling. "You are different from what I expected," Zarya murmured, more to herself than to him. "Your species is weak, yes. But there is something in you, something that makes me question everything I have known." Eli's heart beat a little faster, but he refused to let it show. The Queen had always looked at him with disdain, like a specimen to be studied. But now, for the first time, she seemed almost vulnerable. He quickly shook off the thought. This was a dangerous game, one he couldn't afford to lose. "Your Majesty," Eli said, his voice steady, "I'm not asking for your admiration. I'm asking for peace. I'm asking for a chance for humanity to prove we belong here." Zarya's eyes softened, just for a second, before the familiar coldness returned. She turned her back on him, walking toward a large display screen embedded in the wall. The screen flickered to life, showing images of various star systems, military fleets, and Zainari strongholds. She didn't seem to notice that Eli was still watching her intently. "You humans are strange," Zarya finally said, her voice distant, as if she were talking more to herself than to him. "You claim to want peace, yet your species is built on conflict. You have so much potential, but you squander it on petty wars and pointless struggles." Eli didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped forward slowly until he was standing just behind her. "What if I told you that we're not so different from your people? We fight, yes, but we also build. We make mistakes, but we learn, and we fight to protect what we love." Zarya turned her head slightly, her gaze still fixed on the star maps. You talk of love, human, but love is a weakness. It clouds judgment, it destroys strength. Maybe, Eli said, his voice quiet. But it's also what makes us stronger. It's why we fight. The Queen's lips twisted into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. You are bold for such a weak species. I'm bold because I'm human, Eli replied, his voice filled with quiet confidence. And I'm not backing down. There was a long silence between them. The Zainari Queen stood tall, her eyes still trained on the star maps, her mind seemingly far away. Eli could see the wheels turning in her mind, the conflict brewing beneath her calm exterior. Tell me, human, Zarya said suddenly, her voice cold once more. What do you think will happen after all of this? After you prove your strength? Do you think I will welcome your species into my empire? Eli hesitated for a moment, then replied, I don't think you'll ever fully welcome us, but I believe we can learn to work together. We can build something stronger, not just for us but for the galaxy. Zarya turned slowly to face him again. Her eyes bored into him, and for the briefest moment, Eli thought he saw something in them, a flicker of something more than mere calculation, something more human. You are a fool, Zarya said, though her tone wasn't as harsh as it had been before. You don't understand what you're asking. You do not know what you are up against. Eli stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I do know, Your Majesty. I know that humanity has always been underestimated, and we've always come out stronger in the end. The Queen stared at him for a long moment, as if considering his words carefully. For the first time since their meeting, Eli felt the weight of her gaze in a different way. There was a vulnerability there, hidden beneath the layers of her pride. It made him wonder if she was beginning to understand something about humanity that she hadn't before. I will not make promises, human, Zarya said at last, her voice low but not unkind. But I will give you this, I will watch, I will wait, and I will see if you are truly as strong as you claim to be. Eli nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't expected her to bend so easily, but this was something. He had made her reconsider. At least for a moment. Thank you, he said, his voice genuine. That's all we ask for, a chance. Zarya looked at him for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she turned away, her posture stiff and commanding once more. You may go, Captain Carson, she said, her tone colder than before. But remember this, the next test will be far more difficult than the last. Eli didn't need to be told twice. He turned and left the room, his mind racing. The Queen's challenge wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, he had the sense that they were no longer just enemies. Something had shifted, something that could change the course of everything. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were filled with a quiet intensity. Eli Carson couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. What had started as a test to prove humanity's worth had evolved into something deeper, an unspoken bond between him and Queen Zarya. The Queen, once a ruler of cold pride and arrogance, was now a puzzle that Eli found himself compelled to understand. But there was no denying it. They were still enemies. And in the cold, vast expanse of space, enemies rarely became allies without bloodshed. Eli's thoughts were interrupted as the doors to his quarters slid open. A Zainari guard stepped in, towering over him, their glowing red eyes fixed on him. Captain Carson, the guard's voice was deep and emotionless. The Queen summons you. Eli's stomach tightened. He had not seen Zarya in several days, and he had begun to wonder what was happening in the corridors of power on Zainar. The tensions within the Empire were growing. Factions of her own people were starting to question her judgment, especially after her strange interest in the human. He had been expecting this moment, but that didn't make it any less daunting. With a silent nod, Eli followed the guard down the winding halls of the palace. The walls were sleek, dark, and adorned with alien symbols. As they approached the Queen's private chamber, a wave of cool air greeted him. The Queen stood before the vast window, looking out at the endless expanse of space. Her posture was as regal as ever, but there was something different about her today. Her usual aura of unshakable confidence was tinged with something more uncertain. "Captain," Zarya's voice was steady but lacked the usual coldness. "You have proven yourself more than I expected." Eli stood at attention, but he couldn't ignore the strange sense of connection he felt in her presence now. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice respectful, though there was a fire beneath it. "I told you before, humans are not as weak as you think." Zarya didn't turn to face him, her gaze still fixed on the stars. "You have survived every test I have given you. But now, Captain Carson, the true test begins." Eli's heart rate picked up. "What do you mean?" Finally, the Queen turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those glowing, crimson eyes, held something new, something Eli couldn't quite decipher. "You have become an unexpected variable in this game. You have stirred emotions within my people. They see you as a threat now, a symbol of weakness in my leadership. A few have already begun to question my decisions. They believe you will bring destruction, and they will stop at nothing to rid me of you." Eli's chest tightened. He had known that Zarya's people wouldn't be pleased with the bond that was forming between their queen and a human. But to hear her say it so plainly, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. "You're saying they want me dead?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. Zarya's eyes flickered with something, maybe regret. "Not just you, Captain. They want to challenge my rule. If I do not act, if I do not prove my strength, my leadership will be questioned forever. My people will turn against me." Eli took a step forward. "Then you have to fight, you have to stand up to them." Zarya's gaze hardened, but there was something vulnerable hidden beneath her fierce exterior. "I have ruled the Zainari Empire for centuries, Carson. I am not afraid of a challenge. But this is different. If I cannot defeat them, I lose everything. And you too will be swept away." Eli stood his ground. "I've been fighting since the day I was born. This is just another battle. We'll win this just like we've won every other fight, together." For a moment the Queen looked at him, her gaze piercing through him. Then she nodded. "Very well, but understand this, human, I do not trust easily. You will have to prove yourself. If you fail, everything is lost." Eli didn't hesitate. "I won't fail." The following days were filled with preparation. Zarya's enemies within her court were not easily defeated. Her most powerful generals, those who had once been loyal to her, were now rallying against her rule. They saw Eli and his influence over the Queen as a weakness, something that needed to be eradicated for the Zainari to remain as the supreme power in the galaxy. Eli spent his time in the palace, training with the Queen's guards, learning their combat techniques. He had trained for years in the Earth's space fleet, but the Zainari fighting style was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was brutal and efficient, focused on precision and strength. Yet as he trained, Eli's mind was focused not just on survival, but on the bigger picture. He couldn't let Zarya fall. If she lost, humanity would lose its only chance at survival. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than Eli had expected. The Queen stood at the head of her army, her soldiers lined up before her, their weapons gleaming in the dim light of the palace courtyard. Eli stood beside her, a part of the Zainari forces now, even if he was still regarded with suspicion by many. But Zarya's trust in him had grown. More than just a symbol of defiance, he was becoming her ally. "The time has come," Zarya's voice rang out, her tone firm and commanding. "Today, we fight not just for the future of our empire, but for our very survival. We will show those who doubt us that the Zainari are not easily defeated." Eli's heart pounded in his chest as he stood beside her. There was no turning back now. The fate of the Queen and humanity rested on this battle. The enemy forces arrived shortly after, led by a powerful general named Varak. His eyes, like Zarya's, glowed a deep crimson, but there was no warmth in them. Varak was everything Zarya had once been, cold, ruthless, and unyielding. "You are weak, Zarya," Varak shouted across the battlefield, his voice carrying with the force of a thunderclap. "You are unfit to lead. Your weakness will bring the downfall of the Zainari Empire." Zarya's eyes narrowed, her hand gripping the hilt of her weapon. "You are wrong, Varak. The true strength of the Zainari lies not in our might alone, but in our ability to adapt. And humanity has shown me that we can adapt, we can evolve." Eli stood beside her, his fists clenched, ready for the coming fight. This was more than just a battle for the throne. This was the culmination of everything they had fought for: humanity's survival, Zarya's reign, and the future of the galaxy. The battle was fierce, a brutal clash of weapons and wills. Eli fought alongside the Queen's forces. Each strike he made not just a defense of his own life, but a defense of the future they were building. The Zainari soldiers fought with unmatched ferocity, but Eli's presence, a human among them, gave them something they hadn't had before: the courage to fight for something more than just power. As the battle raged on, it became clear that Zarya's leadership was beginning to win over even those who had once doubted her. Varak's forces were weakening, and his grip on power was slipping. Finally, in a final, desperate move, Varak charged toward Zarya, his blade raised high. But Eli, quick and determined, stepped forward, intercepting the strike with his own weapon. In a flash of motion, Eli disarmed Varak, sending his blade flying across the battlefield. The general fell to his knees, defeated. Zarya stepped forward, her eyes burning with a fierce light. "This is the end, Varak," she said coldly. "You have lost." Varak's defiance crumbled as he realized the truth. The Queen had won. With her strength and Eli's unexpected influence, she had defeated those who sought to overthrow her. The battle was over. The Zainari Empire had been saved, and for the first time, Eli realized that humanity had earned its place in the galaxy, not through brute strength or mindless violence, but through resilience, unity, and the willingness to stand alongside others, no matter the odds. As the dust settled, Zarya turned to Eli, her expression unreadable but her eyes full of something new: respect. "You were right, human. We are stronger together." Eli nodded, his gaze steady. "We always have been." And with that, the future of both humanity and the Zainari began a new chapter, one where they would build together, stronger than ever before.